Your soulmate may be leaving next week. The real reason could surprise you. My beloved child. Something has shifted behind the scenes, and your soulmate may be preparing to leave as early as next week. But here is the detail that changes everything: this decision may not mean what you first think it means. For days, they have been quietly carrying a choice they haven't known how to explain to you. A conversation happened recently. One that forced them to look at their future differently. Since then, they've been organizing things, changing plans, and keeping one important detail to themselves. From the outside, it could look as though they're creating distance. But underneath that silence is an emotion they have been trying desperately to understand. Don't skip, because the destination isn't the biggest mystery here. The real question is why they suddenly believe leaving could change what happens between you. What makes this even stranger is that their decision wasn't made after an argument or a moment of disappointment. It came after they learned something unexpected about an opportunity connected to their future. At first, they almost rejected it. Then someone asked them one simple question: what are you really waiting for? That question stayed with them. All night, they thought about the life they have now, the life they could have somewhere else, and the one person they couldn't remove from either picture: you. That's when their plan became complicated. Because leaving might open a door they have wanted for a long time, yet walking through that door could mean finally admitting something they've avoided saying directly. Stay till the end, because there is one detail about this possible departure that even the people closest to them don't know yet. And this is where everything begins to turn. Your soulmate hasn't simply been thinking about where they're going. They've been thinking about what, or who, they want waiting on the other side of this decision. A message has been written but not sent. A conversation has been rehearsed in their mind more than once. They keep imagining how you might react when you finally understand why next week matters so much. Something huge is waiting for you, because their silence isn't empty, it's filled with a decision they are almost ready to reveal. And just when it seemed their departure was about moving away from everything familiar, one hidden clue suggests the opposite. They may be leaving because they're trying to create a future that finally has room for something they've been afraid to ask you about. But before that question reaches you, there is one person they need to speak with first, and what that person knows could completely change the plan. What happened in that private conversation changed the entire meaning of next week. Your soulmate went into it expecting practical advice about the opportunity ahead, but instead, the person sitting across from them brought up you. Not casually. They asked why every major decision seemed to circle back to one particular person, even when your soulmate tried to focus only on their own future. For a moment, there was silence. Then came an answer nobody expected. Your soulmate admitted that leaving wasn't frightening because of the new place, the unfamiliar routine, or everything they might have to rebuild. The hardest part was imagining something important happening between you while they were gone. That realization exposed the truth they had been avoiding. Their biggest concern wasn't leaving. It was whether leaving might cost them the chance to finally tell you what they've been holding inside. But another detail surfaced immediately afterward. The opportunity they're considering may not be as permanent as everyone assumes. There is a choice hidden inside it, a choice your soulmate hasn't shared with friends or family because they haven't made the final decision yet. They could follow the original plan and build an entirely separate chapter, or they could change one major condition before accepting it. And somehow, that condition connects directly to the future they imagine with you. Don't skip. This is where their behavior over the last few days starts making sense. The unanswered messages, the unusual quiet, the moments when they almost said something and then changed the subject, those weren't signs that they had stopped caring. They were trying to decide whether they had enough courage to ask you a question that could completely reshape what happens next. Then, earlier today, something happened that pushed them closer to an answer. They opened that unsent message again. This time, instead of deleting another sentence, they added one. Just one line, but it changed the entire tone of what they had written. Suddenly, the message wasn't about explaining why they might leave. It became something much more personal. An invitation for you to understand what they actually want before any final decision is made. Stay till the end, because next week may no longer be the deadline everyone thinks it is. Your soulmate has quietly given themselves another deadline, one that comes much sooner. Before they confirm anything, they want to know whether the future they've been imagining exists only in their mind, or whether you might see it too. And tonight, they are considering doing something with that message they haven't had the courage to do until now. Tonight could become the moment their carefully guarded plan finally begins to unravel. Your soulmate has looked at that message again and again, but something is different now. Their finger no longer moves toward delete. Instead, they keep rereading the final line, wondering what will happen once you know the truth. Because the message contains something they haven't admitted clearly before, they never wanted this opportunity to become an escape from you. In fact, your presence is one of the reasons they hesitated to accept it at all. But there is another layer. Someone involved in the opportunity recently offered them more flexibility than they originally expected. Suddenly, leaving next week isn't the only possible path. And that unexpected change has forced your soulmate to confront a question they can no longer avoid. If they could build their next chapter without completely leaving you behind, would they choose differently? The surprising part is how quickly their answer seems to be forming. Earlier, they believed they needed distance to understand what they truly wanted. Now they're beginning to realize that distance might only confirm something they already know. They keep remembering small moments with you that seemed ordinary when they happened but feel completely different now. A conversation that lasted longer than expected. A look they couldn't forget. A moment when they wanted to say more but stopped themselves. Those memories are becoming evidence in a decision they once thought was purely about work, timing, and opportunity. Don't skip, because one new clue has appeared. Your soulmate recently asked someone whether plans could still be changed after everything had been prepared. They wouldn't ask that unless another possibility had entered their mind. And that possibility may explain why they haven't officially announced their departure yet. But then came the detail that could change everything again. Your soulmate discovered there may be a short window to delay their final answer, and instead of feeling relieved, they immediately thought about speaking with you. Not weeks from now. Before the departure date arrives. Something huge is waiting for you, because they're no longer asking themselves only, should I leave? The question has become, what do I need to know before I go? And the answer they want cannot come from anyone else. Stay till the end, because that unsent message may soon become a real conversation, and hidden near the bottom is a sentence they have rewritten more times than any other. It isn't about goodbye. It isn't even about the opportunity. It's a question about you, them, and whether one decision could turn two separate futures into something neither of you expected. That one question has become impossible for your soulmate to ignore. Every time they imagine asking it, they picture two completely different futures unfolding from your answer. In one, they leave next week exactly as planned, carrying words they never had the courage to say. In the other, they finally tell you why this decision has felt so heavy from the beginning. And here is the unexpected clue: they recently changed one important arrangement connected to the departure. Nothing has been cancelled, but something has deliberately been left unfinished. Almost as if they're keeping a door open. The people around them believe it's simply hesitation. They don't realize your soulmate is waiting for one conversation before making everything official. Don't skip, because what they want from that conversation isn't permission to leave. It's something far more personal. For the first time, your soulmate is beginning to admit that this opportunity was never only about chasing a new future. Part of them believed leaving would finally answer a question they've carried quietly: would their feelings for you fade with distance, or become impossible to deny? But before they could test that theory, something happened. They imagined arriving somewhere new, experiencing something incredible, and instinctively wanting to tell you first. That tiny realization stopped them. They understood that changing locations wouldn't automatically change where their heart and attention returned. Stay till the end, because this is where their original reason for leaving begins to transform. What started as a chance to discover who they could become without familiar surroundings is becoming a reason to decide who they genuinely want beside them when their life changes. And now there is another twist. The person who offered them flexibility has apparently asked for a final decision sooner than expected. Your soulmate doesn't have unlimited time anymore. They have a narrow window to choose between following the original arrangement and requesting the alternative they've quietly been considering. Something huge is waiting for you, because that alternative includes one condition your soulmate once would have been too nervous to even suggest. Before answering, they're planning to finally reach out to you, not with a dramatic goodbye, but with an honest conversation about what comes after next week. They want to know whether they've misunderstood the connection between you, or whether you've been holding back too. And just when they thought the hardest part would be asking that question, they discovered something about the alternative arrangement that could make your answer matter even more than they realized. The alternative arrangement contains one possibility your soulmate never expected to receive. Instead of disappearing into a completely separate life, they may be able to return much sooner than originally planned, or structure the opportunity in a way that keeps an important connection within reach. The moment they learned this, their entire attitude changed. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether they could survive being away from you. It was whether they actually wanted distance in the first place. They started looking back at every reason they had given themselves for leaving, and one by one, those reasons began sounding incomplete. Don't skip, because your soulmate is finally recognizing something they couldn't admit when this began. Part of their excitement about a fresh start was actually an attempt to avoid having one deeply honest conversation with you. That realization hit harder when they reread the message they've been keeping. They noticed something strange about their own words. Almost every explanation about leaving eventually turned into a sentence about you. What would you think? Would you miss them? Would you understand why they accepted this opportunity? Would anything between you change while they were gone? Those questions revealed what the departure plans had been hiding all along. Your soulmate wasn't simply preparing for a new chapter. They were measuring that chapter against the possibility of losing closeness with you. Stay till the end, because they made another quiet change today. They removed one sentence from the message, the sentence that sounded most like a farewell, and replaced it with something that left the future completely open. That wasn't an accidental edit. It was a decision. And now the clock is moving faster. They have been asked to confirm one final detail before the end of the week, but your soulmate doesn't want to answer until they've spoken with you. Something huge is waiting for you, because they're considering telling you the real reason they kept this departure quiet for so long. They feared that if they told you too early, your reaction might influence their choice. But now they've realized the opposite. Making such an important decision without knowing where you truly stand may be the bigger mistake. So the message is almost ready. The conversation is closer than ever. Yet just before sending it, your soulmate received another piece of information about next week's opportunity, and this time, it wasn't about when they would leave or when they could return. It was about who they could bring into the future they're being offered. That final detail changed the question your soulmate had been asking themselves all week. Until now, they believed this opportunity required them to choose between moving forward and preserving what they feel with you. But the new information revealed that those two things may not have to compete. There could be room for someone important to become part of their future plans, not immediately, and not through some rushed decision, but through a possibility they hadn't considered before. The moment they understood that, you were the first person who came to mind. And that frightened them in a completely different way. Because thinking about missing you was one thing. Quietly imagining you somewhere in their next chapter was another. Don't skip. Your soulmate has now realized that the real reason this departure feels so enormous isn't because they're afraid of leaving. It's because they're afraid of discovering how much they want you included in whatever comes next. That realization has changed the message again. The long explanation they spent days carefully writing suddenly felt unnecessary. They began removing excuses, complicated details, and every sentence designed to protect them from an uncomfortable answer. What remained was surprisingly simple. They wanted to talk before next week. They wanted honesty. Most importantly, they wanted to stop pretending this decision had nothing to do with you. Stay till the end, because something happened immediately after they shortened that message. For the first time, they almost sent it without hesitation. Then they stopped, not because they changed their mind, but because they remembered something you once said. It was a small remark you may not even remember making, yet your soulmate has carried it with them. And now those words could influence whether they accept the original plan or request the alternative. Here is where the mystery becomes even deeper. Your soulmate has started wondering whether that old remark was actually a clue about how you feel. They replayed the moment, remembered your expression, and questioned why they never asked what you truly meant. Something huge is waiting for you, because instead of sending the message they had prepared, they're considering opening the conversation with that memory. They want to know whether they misunderstood you all this time. If they did, they may leave next week carrying a completely different understanding of your connection. But if they didn't, if that moment meant what they're beginning to suspect, then the alternative arrangement suddenly becomes far more important. And before your soulmate makes their final choice, there is one truth about that old conversation they are determined to uncover. That old conversation is suddenly becoming the missing piece your soulmate never knew they needed. At the time, your words seemed simple, almost easy to overlook, but there was something underneath them that stayed in their memory. You spoke about people choosing what truly matters before circumstances choose for them. Your soulmate remembered smiling, changing the subject, and pretending the sentence hadn't affected them. Now, with next week approaching, those words feel completely different. They are wondering whether you were speaking generally, or whether part of you was quietly speaking about the connection between you. Don't skip, because this memory has pushed them toward a decision. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment, they're preparing to ask what you actually meant. And for the first time, they are more afraid of never knowing your answer than they are of hearing something unexpected. Something else happened while they were thinking about that moment. Your soulmate looked at the original departure plan and noticed how quickly everything had been arranged. They had accepted dates, responsibilities, and expectations before giving themselves enough time to understand what the change would mean emotionally. Now they're slowing everything down. Not abandoning the opportunity. Not making promises they cannot keep. Simply refusing to make a life-changing choice while pretending their feelings don't exist. Stay till the end, because this is the first time they've admitted to themselves that leaving may have seemed easier than being vulnerable with you. Distance offered certainty. An honest conversation does not. But strangely, uncertainty no longer feels like something they should run from. It feels like the one thing they finally need to face before next week arrives. And then came a development nobody around them expected. Your soulmate contacted the person handling the opportunity and asked a very specific question about changing the timeline. The answer wasn't an immediate yes, but it wasn't a no either. There may be another option, provided they make their intentions clear soon. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate didn't feel trapped when they heard that. They felt relieved. For the first time, they could picture making this decision after speaking honestly with you instead of disappearing with everything unresolved. Now the unsent message is open again, shorter than ever, and the final sentence has changed one more time. They are no longer asking whether you would care if they left. They're preparing to ask something much more revealing. If next week didn't have to separate your paths, would you want to know what they have been imagining for the two of you? And before they send it, one unexpected response about the changed timeline is about to arrive. The response about the changed timeline arrived sooner than your soulmate expected, and for several seconds, they simply stared at it. The original departure date could be adjusted, but only if they confirmed the alternative arrangement quickly. Suddenly, the pressure of next week changed completely. They weren't being forced to leave without answers anymore. They had been given a choice, and that choice made one truth impossible to ignore. They wanted to speak with you before deciding anything. Not because they expected you to make the decision for them, but because they were tired of building a future around assumptions. Don't skip, because this is the moment your soulmate finally stopped treating their feelings like an inconvenient detail. They realized that whatever happens next, they don't want another important chapter to begin with words they were too afraid to say. So they returned to the message, but this time they didn't rewrite it. They read it once, closed their eyes, and imagined two outcomes. In the first, they stayed silent, followed the original plan, and spent weeks wondering what might have happened if they'd simply been honest. In the second, they reached out and finally discovered where you stood, even if the answer changed everything. The second possibility frightened them, but it also brought an unexpected sense of relief. Stay till the end, because your soulmate has now understood the real reason they may be leaving next week. It isn't because they've stopped caring about you. It isn't because they found something more important. This opportunity appeared at exactly the moment when they could no longer avoid deciding what kind of future they actually wanted. And somehow, every version of that future kept bringing their thoughts back to you. But there is still one final complication. Before confirming the changed timeline, your soulmate was asked to explain why they suddenly needed more flexibility. They could have given an easy answer. Instead, they hesitated, and then decided they were done hiding behind convenient explanations. Something huge is waiting for you, because the answer they are preparing to give will be the first time they openly acknowledge that someone important has influenced how they see this next chapter. They may not reveal every feeling yet, but once those words are spoken, the secret they've protected becomes much harder to keep. And now the message meant for you is sitting ready, no longer being edited or reconsidered. There is only one decision left between your soulmate and that send button, but what they just learned about the alternative timeline may give them a reason to contact you much sooner than either of you expected. Before your soulmate could make that final move, one more detail arrived, and it completely changed the urgency of the conversation. The alternative timeline would work, but there was a condition: they couldn't remain undecided for much longer. A clear answer had to come soon. Instead of feeling pressured, your soulmate suddenly felt focused. For days, they had been treating next week like a finish line, believing everything needed to be settled before then. Now they understood that the real deadline wasn't the departure itself. It was the moment they finally stopped hiding what mattered to them. Don't skip, because this is where their hesitation begins turning into action. They aren't asking whether they should forget you and move forward anymore. They're asking whether moving forward could actually mean becoming more honest about you. Then something surprisingly simple happened. Your soulmate opened the message, read the final sentence, and realized they didn't want this conversation to happen through carefully edited words. The message could explain the opportunity, the timeline, and the possible departure, but it couldn't capture what they actually needed you to understand. So they changed their plan. Instead of sending everything, they're considering sending only enough to open the door to a real conversation. No complicated explanation. No dramatic goodbye. Just an honest request to talk before the decision becomes final. Stay till the end, because that choice reveals something important. Your soulmate isn't looking for reassurance anymore. They want clarity. They want to hear your thoughts naturally, without pushing you toward any particular answer. And whatever you say could finally resolve the question that has followed them through every version of this plan. But the biggest surprise may be what your soulmate has decided about leaving itself. They are no longer measuring the opportunity only by what they could gain somewhere else. They're asking what kind of person they want to become while pursuing it, and whether that person continues avoiding meaningful conversations or finally faces them. Something huge is waiting for you, because they have quietly prepared two responses to the offer. One accepts the original departure next week. The other requests the changed arrangement and creates more time before everything shifts. Neither response has been sent. Your soulmate wants one conversation first. And just when it seemed the choice depended entirely on what happens between you, they noticed a detail in the alternative offer they had overlooked before, a detail suggesting that changing the timeline might open a completely new possibility neither of you has considered yet. That overlooked detail may be the reason your soulmate has suddenly stopped thinking of next week as a goodbye. Buried inside the alternative offer was a possibility to begin the opportunity differently, one that would give them more control over when they leave, how long they remain away, and what happens afterward. They read that section twice because it completely challenged the story they had been telling themselves. For days, they believed they had only two choices. Leave and risk changing everything between you, or stay and wonder whether they had sacrificed something important. Now there is a third possibility. Don't skip, because this option doesn't require them to choose between their future and their feelings. It requires something much harder, honesty about what they actually want before they make the next move. And that honesty is finally becoming impossible to avoid. Your soulmate has started recognizing that the opportunity itself was never the deepest reason they considered leaving so quickly. A part of them wanted a major change because staying close to you while keeping everything unspoken had become emotionally confusing. They thought a new environment might make their feelings easier to understand. But every preparation had the opposite effect. The closer the departure became, the clearer those feelings became. Stay till the end, because your soulmate has now reached a realization they weren't expecting. They don't need distance to discover whether you matter. The possibility of distance already answered that question. What they still don't know is whether this connection has been living quietly on both sides, and that is why the conversation they once avoided has become more important than the departure itself. Then came the moment that could finally move everything forward. Your soulmate deleted the two prepared responses to the offer. Not because they're rejecting the opportunity, but because neither response reflected what they know now. They want to make the decision after speaking with you, without pretending your connection is irrelevant and without placing the responsibility for their future on your shoulders. Something huge is waiting for you, because they've replaced those responses with a new plan. First, tell you the truth. Second, listen carefully to what you genuinely feel, and only then decide how next week should unfold. But before they could reach out, another message appeared from the person managing the opportunity. It contained a question your soulmate never expected to receive, and their answer could reveal exactly why the alternative arrangement was offered to them in the first place. The question in that message was surprisingly personal. What had changed since your soulmate first accepted the original plan? They could have answered with timing, responsibilities, or practical concerns. Instead, they sat there realizing none of those explanations were completely true. What changed was their understanding of what they might leave unresolved. For the first time, your soulmate wrote an answer that admitted an important relationship in their life needed clarity before they made such a major transition. They didn't mention your name. They didn't reveal everything. But writing those words made the truth feel real. Don't skip, because the response they received was even more unexpected. The person handling the opportunity didn't question them or pressure them. They simply said that knowing what matters before making a major decision can prevent the wrong kind of regret. Those words stayed with your soulmate longer than expected. Suddenly, they remembered how quickly they had agreed to leave next week, almost as though speed would protect them from second thoughts. But now the second thoughts weren't telling them to abandon their future. They were telling them to stop pretending you had nothing to do with how they imagined it. That difference mattered. Stay till the end, because something changed immediately afterward. Your soulmate stopped drafting explanations and started preparing for a real conversation. They thought about what they needed to say without making you responsible for their choice. They wanted you to understand that the opportunity matters to them, but so does knowing whether the connection they've felt has been real on both sides. For once, they weren't searching for the perfect words. They were searching for the courage to ask the right question. And then they made the smallest move yet, but potentially the most important one. Instead of sending the long message, your soulmate typed a short opening asking whether the two of you could talk before next week. They read it once. Then twice. This time, they didn't erase it. Something huge is waiting for you, because behind that simple request is everything they've been unable to say, why leaving suddenly feels different, why they changed the timeline, and why every version of their future somehow keeps returning to you. But just before sending it, they received confirmation about the alternative arrangement. One specific part had officially been approved. Your soulmate now has a choice they didn't have when this story began, and what they decide after speaking with you could completely change whether next week becomes a departure, a delay, or the beginning of an entirely different plan. Now that the alternative has officially been approved, your soulmate can no longer blame the situation for whatever happens next. The decision is finally theirs. They can follow the original schedule and leave next week, or choose the adjusted path that gives them more time to understand what this connection truly means. Strangely, having more freedom hasn't made the choice easier. It has made everything more honest. Because now they must admit why they wanted that flexibility so badly in the first place. Don't skip. The answer isn't that they suddenly became uncertain about their ambitions. They still want the opportunity. What changed is their belief that moving forward requires leaving every meaningful connection behind. And once they recognized that, one thought became impossible to silence: maybe the future they want isn't waiting somewhere far away. Maybe part of it has already been standing much closer than they realized. That thought finally pushed them past hesitation. Your soulmate looked at the short message asking to speak before next week and understood there would never be a perfect moment to send it. Waiting another day would only create another excuse. So they stopped rehearsing your possible response. They stopped trying to predict whether you would be surprised, confused, or quietly relieved. What mattered was giving both of you a chance to speak honestly before circumstances made the conversation harder. Stay till the end, because their plan for that conversation has changed too. They aren't going to begin by talking about leaving. They want to begin with the question they've avoided from the start: whether the connection between you has meant more than either of you has openly acknowledged. Only after hearing your truth will they explain why next week's departure became the event that forced them to face their own. But there is still something you don't know. The approved alternative includes enough flexibility for your soulmate to reconsider not only when they leave, but what their life could look like afterward. And that possibility has awakened an idea they had never allowed themselves to take seriously. Something huge is waiting for you, because they are no longer imagining two separate roads where one person stays and the other disappears into a new chapter. They're beginning to imagine whether those roads could reconnect in a way that respects both of your futures. The message is ready. The opportunity is waiting. Next week is getting closer. Yet the biggest decision may happen before any suitcase is closed or any plan becomes final. Because your soulmate has finally realized the real question was never simply whether they were leaving, it was whether they were willing to leave without discovering what you could have become together. And now, for the first time, they may be ready to find out. Then something unexpected happened before that conversation could begin. Your soulmate received a final clarification about the approved arrangement, and one sentence made them read the message twice. The opportunity had more flexibility than they understood, not only around the departure date, but around how the next chapter could be structured afterward. Suddenly, the future stopped looking like one irreversible choice. Your soulmate realized they had been thinking in extremes: stay or leave, speak or remain silent, choose you or choose the opportunity. But perhaps none of those things had to cancel the others. Don't skip, because this realization brought an even bigger one. The pressure they had felt wasn't coming entirely from next week. Much of it came from their fear that admitting how deeply you mattered would make them vulnerable at exactly the moment they were supposed to appear completely certain. That fear is beginning to lose its power. Your soulmate has spent so much time preparing answers for everyone else that they never stopped to ask what answer they owed themselves. Now they know. They want to move forward without carrying an unanswered question about you into every new experience. They want to know whether those meaningful moments between you were simply important memories, or the beginning of something neither of you had named yet. Stay till the end, because they have finally decided how to approach you. They won't arrive with demands or ask you to decide their future. They will tell you about the opportunity, explain why the timeline changed, and then reveal the part they've kept hidden. When they imagined leaving, the possibility of losing closeness with you affected them more than anything else. That admission alone could change the entire conversation. But just as your soulmate became ready to say it, they remembered one detail that had been buried beneath everything else. Weeks before this opportunity appeared, they had already caught themselves imagining a future moment with you, something ordinary, almost insignificant, yet strangely specific. At the time, they dismissed it as nothing. Now it feels like evidence that their feelings began influencing their future long before next week's departure forced them to notice. Something huge is waiting for you, because that forgotten memory may explain why they resisted the original plan from the very beginning. And when your soulmate finally recognized what that imagined moment represented, they realized there is one truth they haven't even written in the unsent message yet, a truth that could make their real reason for possibly leaving next week far more surprising than anyone around them knows. That forgotten memory was never about some grand event. It was surprisingly ordinary. Your soulmate had once imagined finishing a long day, reaching for their phone, and knowing exactly who they wanted to tell everything to, you. At the time, they dismissed the thought because it seemed too simple to mean anything. But now they understand why it returned whenever they pictured leaving. They weren't afraid of a different place or a different routine. They were afraid that distance might quietly remove those small moments before they ever had the courage to discover what those moments could become. Don't skip, because this is where the real reason behind next week begins to surface. Your soulmate may have accepted the opportunity partly because they believed a major change would finally force them to understand their feelings. Instead, preparing to leave has shown them that those feelings were already clearer than they wanted to admit. And there is another truth they haven't shared with anyone. When the opportunity first appeared, your soulmate secretly believed that if they left and immediately felt relieved, they would finally know the connection between you wasn't as important as they imagined. But the opposite happened. Every step toward departure made them notice you more. Every plan created another question. Every conversation about the future made them wonder where you belonged inside it. Stay till the end, because your soulmate now sees the mistake in their original thinking. They were trying to use distance to answer something only honesty could answer. That's why the approved alternative matters so much. It gives them a chance to stop running an experiment inside their own mind and finally have the conversation they've postponed. They don't need next week to tell them whether you matter anymore. They already know that answer. But knowing you matter has created a much bigger mystery. Your soulmate still doesn't know what happens if you reveal that you've been feeling something similar. That possibility has become more powerful than the departure itself. Something huge is waiting for you, because they have started imagining what they would change if that conversation went differently than expected. The adjusted timeline. The way they communicate while away. Even what they might choose when the opportunity reaches its next stage. Nothing has been promised, and they know one conversation cannot decide an entire future. But they are finally willing to let the truth influence their choices instead of pretending it doesn't exist. And now, just before reaching out, your soulmate has discovered one final detail about why this opportunity came to them in the first place. A detail connected to a decision they made months ago, long before they ever believed they might have to leave you behind.